risk-consequence probability matrix shows a 5x6 matrix as an example. Depending on your level of likelihood and consequence, there are 5 risk levels. ANSI Z10 defines these levels as high, serious, medium, or low, while 31010 adds a 5th level, which we will call negligible. The definitions refer to the type of evaluation and treatment that should be applied based on the level of risk determined. For example, a high risk per ANSI Z10 suggests that the operation is not permissible. They guide you to either stop the job, provide continuous oversight, or add layers of protection in the form of additional controls or mitigations. Using a risk matrix can be very subjective, and there tends to be significant variation between evaluators. The better risk factors like likelihood and consequence are defined, the better the risk matrix will be for your risk assessments. To evaluate risks, the third step in the assessment process is to determine what controls or mitigations may be in place or additionally considered. The reliability of these controls is a key factor in the risk assessment process. The most preferred and most reliable control is, of course, risk avoidance. This means making sure risks are designed out before the operation or activity take place. Elimination is also most reliable, typically performed after the activity or operation is already in place. For example, if working at heights is a big contributor to your organizational historical losses and/or potential high risk, designing a facility to have all equipment at floor level, risk avoidance, is most reliable. But eliminating working at heights after the fact eliminates both the likelihood and consequence of an event occurring. Installing railings, which are engineering controls, certainly can minimize the likelihood of falling, but the potential consequence remains, that is, falling from height. Therefore, engineering controls are not as effective as elimination or avoidance, but are more effective than just telling people to stay away from the edge, which is a warning. ANSI Z590.3, Prevention Through Design, is one of the guidance documents risk assessors may use to help them better understand the relationship among the hierarchy of controls and effectiveness. Ultimately, the effectiveness of controls impacts the reductions realized by the risk factors, and therefore risk levels itself. Now that the level of risk is determined, decisions can be made if the residual risk is acceptable or not. This drives future decisions and actions. Depending on the level of detail in the context or corporate policies and procedures, residual risk may yet face ethical, legal, and other challenges before the final decision regarding acceptability is made. The treatment plan should clearly identify the priority order in which individual risk treatments should be implemented. This is often on the risk level, but also often on the feasibility and cost of implementing the control or treatment. Treatment can also include sharing risk, transferring risks, changing likelihood or consequences. Documenting the risk treatments or proposed actions, responsibilities, and resources are part of the treatment process. In addition, performance should be measured and monitored on a periodic basis to verify conformance. Communication is another critical element of risk management. Communication should occur before, during, and after risk assessments. Stakeholders often have unique insight into the potential risk scenarios, control effectiveness, and/or treatment options. Therefore, their input can often be quite valuable. Likewise, once controls are established and identified, they can be more effective if their existence and purpose are communicated to the workforce, their supervisors, and other key parts of the organization. Communication is more than just a one-time lecture. It is a dialogue, often ongoing, with an opportunity for questions and answers, observations, and feedback to ensure learning and behavior motivations are occurring. The involvement of stakeholders before and during the risk assessment process, known as consultation, can be extremely beneficial. ISO 31000 points out a number of benefits as listed on this slide, just to name a few. For example, if a solution is determined to be a work procedure and not an engineering control, agreement to that procedure is important if everyone will be expected to follow. If stakeholders or workers do not feel it is a good idea or the right thing to do, Then there will be variation or deviations in the performance of this standardized work. Consultation can secure endorsement for a treatment plan. Another key element of management is monitoring. The first time an organization embarks in performing a risk assessment, often it is impossible to be perfect the first time out. Same with control selection and communications. To manage these steps, some sort of verification is necessary. Thus, monitoring each of the previous elements or aspects is part of the risk management process. Within the monitoring aspect, data is collected, analyzed, and presented to management and stakeholders on a regular and periodic basis. This ensures that risks are still being controlled to expectations and objectives. Based on the data collected from the monitoring aspect, management and stakeholder review is essential to ensuring risks are being controlled to the predetermined acceptable level. Monitoring data and metrics also includes the status of risk treatment plans, if risk reduction objectives are being achieved. Take a minute now to answer each of the questions true or false. Question 1. ANSI 690 series and ISO 72-31010 are the same document. The answer to number 1 is true. Number 2. Risk assessment is an integral part of risk management. The answer to number 2 is true. Number 3. Only low risk can be acceptable risk. The answer to number 3 is false. The level of acceptable risk is defined by each organization as part of creating the context. Some organizations also define this when deciding on their risk matrix. In summary, risk management is about removing or controlling as many of the uncertainties toward achieving your organization's objectives and strategies. Risk assessments are an integral part of that process in that they help you determine risk, controls, and treatment options. In addition, the risk assessment documents the controls that need to be communicated and monitored to be effective. Risk management objectives or targets are no longer just the absence of injuries, but the ongoing reduction of risks, exposures, and risk factors of likelihood and consequence. Please continue to explore and review the rest of the Risk Assessment Institute's series on risk assessments. We recommend these resources and references for your risk assessment library.